Hi, everyone. Much for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you all here at this virtual event. My name is Ryan Plummer. I'm going to be your host and, and also your moderator for today. And there's going to be two parts about this event, and I'm just so excited about it. We were talking just before opening up the stream to everybody, and the whole group that's here today that you see in front of you is extremely excited to be here. So what I want to do today is first introduce our dignitaries that are here to say a little bit and provide some opening remarks to all of you about the partnership that we're launching between World Wildlife Fund Canada and Brock University. And then after that, we're going to shift and get involved in a panel discussion about the future of fresh water. So that's an awful lot to pack into an hour, and I know time flies on these calls. And so I want to, without further ado, get right into our opening remarks. And with that, we're extremely fortunate to be joined by two dignitaries from World Wildlife Fund Canada, as well as Brock University. So I'm going to introduce each of our dignitaries, and then I'll ask each of them to say a few opening remarks. First of all, we have Dr. Tim Kenyon. Tim is the Vice President in Research at Brock University, and he's published award-winning research in social epistemology, critical thinking pedagogy, as well as language pragmatics, formal logic, and research bibliometrics. I apologize, I had to read that to make sure I got it all right. Prior to joining us at Brock, and we're extremely fortunate to have Tim with us, he held appointments at St. Andrews, Aberdeen, and Waterloo, where he received the University of Waterloo Distinguished Teaching Award. Tim has graciously agreed to start our event with a territorial acknowledgement of place and then bring some remarks about the partnership on behalf of Brock University. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. In fairness, I made up all those words, so I'm not surprised that it seemed unfamiliar. I'm pleased to begin this gathering by acknowledging that the land on which Brock University rests is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, it is a gathering place that's home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. That's Brock University's formal land acknowledgement. And it's an opportunity for us to think of how this land acknowledgement relates to what we're discussing today and the wonderful partnership we're celebrating today. I hope we can reflect on the centrality of land and place, seeing it as more than a resource, more than a passive environment, but as partly constituting people, selves, lives, and memory. This helps keep a focus on the imperative to remedy the dispossession and alienation from land and water that Indigenous people have endured and continue to endure in this country. Community partnerships, such as the one with World Wildlife Fund Canada that we're marking today, are integral to Brock University. These partnerships reinforce core values that are clearly spelled out in Brock's institutional strategic plan. They offer a transformational academic experience for students. They enhance the life and vitality of the local region and beyond. And they proceed from the understanding that research and scholarship exist to make a difference. Of course, community is in Brock's DNA. All universities are in some community or other. Brock University was created by the Niagara community. In the late 1950s, the Allenberg Women's Institute saw the future and petitioned Queen's Park to establish a university in Niagara. By the early 1960s, a grassroots campaign had swept the region. Farmers, factory workers, lawyers, bus drivers, business owners, and labor groups held public meetings and fundraisers, made payroll deductions of their own money to fund the construction of the university. Well, Queen's Park took notice, and in 1964, Brock University opened and has grown into one of Ontario's leading mid-sized universities. Today, Brock comprises nearly 20,000 students, including international students from 100 different countries. New and unique research facilities, academic facilities, outstanding researchers that it's my honor to work with, drawn from around the globe. Top 5 in Ontario for National 3M Teaching Awards, and graduates employed above the Ontario average rate. But Brock never forgot the community that created it. We continue to emphasize partnerships that will genuinely strengthen the communities of which we are a member. These partnerships represent our deeply held commitment to the social, intellectual, cultural, and economic vitality of those communities. Brock's outward-facing partnerships include MOUs with hospitals and vital healthcare providers, helping a local municipality deal with the impacts of climate change, major scientific and business support for Canada's biomanufacturing, agri-food, and grape and wine industries, and a collaboration to study the impact on Niagara Parklands of the millions of visitors who come to this destination from around the world. We're particularly pleased that Brock and World Wildlife Fund Canada are working together on a line of inquiry that's crucial to us all. Now more than ever, we need to be focused on the threats and impacts of climate change on fresh water. While that work continues in exciting ways, as you'll hear about today, it also provides a foundation for new collaborative ventures and transdisciplinary research. We're extremely excited to work with World Wildlife Fund Canada on the Partnership for Freshwater Resilience. I wish you a productive discussion today and continued health and safety for you and your loved ones. Thanks. Ryan, back to you.
Thanks so much, Tim. We appreciate it very much. The second dignitary that I have the pleasure of introducing today, and this is a real treat. I get the chance to talk with Tim all the time, and we had a chance to talk about this partnership and who would be joining us on this call, and we were both extremely thrilled to have Megan Leslie join us as our dignitary from World Wildlife Fund Canada. And Megan is the CEO as well as president of WWF Canada. Megan became the head of World Wildlife Fund Canada in 2017 after 2 years at the organization. And first, I understand she was a consultant on ocean governance, and then as the head of ocean conservation. Before coming to WWF, Megan was a member of Parliament representing Halifax for 2 terms. Megan, over to you.
Thanks, Ryan. It feels so fancy to be called a dignitary. Thank you. I'm pretty excited to be here to celebrate our partnership with Brock University. And here we are, meeting online. I do hope that everybody's been staying safe and healthy in these times. And part of staying safe and healthy means that we're not celebrating this partnership in person like we planned to do in March. But I'm just as delighted that we could do it virtually, and we can finally share the news of the great work that Brock University and WWF Canada are doing together. And in this virtual world, the office next door, i.e. my neighbor, is doing some yard work involving chainsaws. So if you can hear that buzz and hum, I'm sorry, but that is the reality of the COVID office environment. And I'm just rolling with it. So Canada, as I'm sure many of you know, is home to 20% of the world's fresh water. And with such abundance comes great responsibility to protect those watersheds for the wildlife and the people who rely on them. Freshwater conservation is a key part of WWF Canada's work, and we're working towards healthy waters across Canada, a goal that's really never been more important. And one way to do this is by building water-resilient communities. And a great example of this is our work in the St. John River Basin, which you're going to hear all about. Our work in the St. John River Basin, funded by RSA Canada, which is a property and casualty insurer, focuses on building climate-resilient communities through ecosystem restoration and natural infrastructure. And the great thing about this work is that it can help other at-risk communities as well, all across Canada. But it can't be done alone. So by working with partners like Brock University, we can scale this work to other regions. And together, we're bringing the latest resilience research and the best practices to a region that's facing increased frequency and intensity of climate impacts like flooding. I'm thrilled to think about how this partnership will contribute to our work and address the challenges and opportunities around freshwater and climate change, because together we're leading the implementation of solutions for resilience. I'm pretty excited about it, and I'm looking forward to hearing everybody talk about their work today. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, Megan. I want to just take a minute and extend my appreciation on behalf of our Research Center, as well as the colleagues from the panel and all those folks joining us in the audience from all over the world, actually, here today. And really say thank you both for making time to join us at this important event. I think your inspirational remarks have really captured the spirit, number one, that this partnership is all about. And number two, I feel a real humanity that you both bring about the circumstances that we're in. I love the fact that your neighbor has a chainsaw going. I saw everybody smile. We're all rolling with this.
I don't love that fact, but okay.
Fair enough. So I just think, thank you both for your inspirational remarks. They provide a wonderful jumping off point for today. And with that, I'm going to, through the magic of the internet, switch gears and start the introduction remarks for our panel discussion. So allow me here to just make things disappear, reappear, and then we'll move on to our panel. But thank you both again so much for joining us today. Okay, so I hope that the internet has worked its magic perfectly and that you now can see our introductory slide. And it's my privilege to be the moderator for this portion of our session today. And I want to start out by introducing the topic of our panel, which is, of course, the future of fresh water. We're extremely fortunate to be joined by 4 outstanding panelists, and I'll introduce each one before saying a little bit just about the format of our panel. So first, I want to introduce Dr. Julia Baird, and maybe the panelists can wave. Of course, your names are also there in case somebody has confusion. Thanks, Julia. Julia is a Canada Research Chair in Human Dimensions of Water Resources and Water Resilience, and an Assistant Professor in the Environmental Sustainability Research Center and the Department of Geography and Tourism Studies. She's a lead from Brock University on this very important partnership. Second, I want to introduce Simon Mitchell. Simon is lead specialist, freshwater. His work based along the St. John River in New Brunswick, which Megan, of course, mentioned in her opening remarks. And he's the lead on the WWF side of this partnership. Third, we have Elizabeth Hendricks. Liz is the Vice President of Freshwater Conservation at WWF Canada. Liz leads a national program that's been running at WWF Canada for the last 12 years. And last, but certainly not least, we have Bridget McGlynn. Bridget is currently a Master of Sustainability candidate who I have the pleasure of co-supervising. Bridget graduated from McMaster University in 2018 with a Bachelor of Science in Integrated Science. Her research interests and master's work include water policy and resource management, and will directly contribute to the aims of the partnership. So welcome to all of our panelists. And just 2 quick administrative things before I get rid of our opening slide and make all of our panelists live. I want to first encourage all of you in the audience while I pose a few initial questions to our panel, to please think about questions that you might have and jot those down, enter them into the right-hand side box on your screen, and we've set some time aside um, later on in the panel in about 30 minutes or so that we'll be able to take some questions from the audience. And with that, allow me to get started. So hopefully this all works well. All right, so welcome panelists, and we will get started since I see no warnings that anything has completely malfunctioned yet. Right, so I think in terms of starting out the panel, the logical starting point, and both Tim and Megan alluded to this in their opening remarks, and that really is a situation that we found ourselves in the last couple months. And those circumstances have highlighted this idea that we have a new normal, and this new normal involves our need to address multiple simultaneous crises. That's the multifaceted water crisis, that's climate emergencies, and that's COVID-19, and they're all happening at once. So maybe the first question that we can ask you to start with is, what is the main issue that you think individuals need to know about fresh water in the face of COVID-19?
Pick me, pick me. Can you hear me, Ryan?
I'm gonna go with Liz for 100. It's all yours, Liz.
Amazing, thank you. So I've heard this great descriptor of COVID-19, and I heard it described as a threat multiplier. The threats, impacts, and issues we were addressing have been multiplied by COVID-19. So what does that actually mean? So for the Canadian and Indigenous communities that didn't have access to clean water prior to COVID, it means that they're facing an even higher risk impacting their family, infrastructure, healthcare, and well-being. For communities prone to increased flooding impacts, this flooding season was particularly dangerous, knowing there was no access to schools if people were evacuated, or large numbers of volunteers helping out with prevention due to social or physical distancing and restrictions. And also, I think our emergency services and municipal services that are already strained. The pressures of COVID prevention measures is putting at times, it feels like this impossible strain on our already vulnerable people and all our communities.
Oh,
I think your mic is muted. We got a sophisticated hand signal. So when I go like this, you know that something is muted.
sorry, of course, the academic has to be the one who can't figure it out. If I can just kind of reflect a little bit on what Liz has said, and then provide some of my own thinking around this. Absolutely, I think we're in the midst of an extremely challenging time, and it's challenging enough with one crisis, but there are others, and they've maybe taken a bit of a backseat in the media, but we certainly recognize that that there are multiple challenges, and water management, water governance is one of those key ones. Despite that, I think there's also some really interesting opportunities that are arising as a result of COVID-19, and just wanted to highlight a couple of those too. So the first one that I was thinking about was really that people are appreciating and showing a much greater interest in nature, in natural places than they did before. And part of that is that nature and space, especially wide open space, has become a bit of a refuge for people, where being in enclosed spaces or in cities is more considered more dangerous. And so there's a couple of studies that have actually come out of Brock very recently that I think are really relevant to this this opportunity. And one was actually published in The Conversation Canada by our esteemed moderator and colleagues, emphasizing the opportunity to rethink green and blue infrastructure in light of this kind of increased desire to be outside, and to have an opportunity to be in nature and seeing nature as a safe place. And I think that that's really important to be thinking about, as we emerge from this crisis, as we inevitably will at some point. And the second study that came out, I think just last week in Brock News, was a study by Tim O'Connell and some of his colleagues, emphasizing the mental health impacts of not being able to access natural places when these restrictions were heavily enforced and parks were closed, and that especially for people who are used to being able to be outside, it causes challenges. And on kind of the opportunity side of that, it also triggered a real desire to protect nature in these people. And so I think that, with this incredible challenge and stressful situation comes an opportunity for us to recognize the real value that nature and water in particular have for us. The other opportunity that I really briefly want to mention is that water has actually been highlighted more, especially as a result of COVID-19, because hygiene has become such an important part of what we do, how we keep ourselves safe. We need to be able to wash our hands. We need access to good, clean water. And also this new kind of recognition that wastewater may actually serve as an early warning system for new COVID-19 outbreaks. And so with this increased focus and attention on water and wastewater, I think there's an opportunity for us as researchers, as practitioners, as people who influence policy, to think about how we use that to start discussions around not just the water that comes out of the tap or goes into the wastewater system, but the broader systems that support our water resources, our fresh water. So river basins, watersheds, and thinking about how we protect our freshwater resources for the future. And I'll ask somebody to maybe post those links to those two articles that I mentioned in the chat box for those who are live streaming if possible.
Happy to do that, no problem at all. So for everyone out there in the audience, you'll see some references to, I like this, Julia, our leading academic in this area, has provided kindly some references to her commentary on the panel. You will all see those coming across the screen shortly.
Yeah, so just to build a bit on Julia and Liz's commentary, I think I really want to speak to sort of the rapid response that we've seen with COVID. We're talking about a pandemic. It's a serious issue, and we have come together in a very short period of time to address it. And I think there's many lessons learned and opportunities coming from this that we can subsequently transfer to the biodiversity crisis, the climate crisis, and any number of other environmental issues. We've seen a rapid mobilization of people in households, in communities, in provinces, in countries, in fact, all around the world. And that has mobilized funding, it has mobilized individuals, and ultimately led to some very rapid reaction. And to me, this is, one of the lessons learned, one of the pieces that we need to take forward post-COVID, and particularly, in the water world, where we have a significant interest amongst this partnership, but also, more broadly across the country. And that across, by working with multiple actors, across multiple sectors, we can ultimately have a positive impact. And so some of those attributes, some of those people skills, resource skills, funding skills, and coordination can ultimately help us tackle climate change and water issues down the road.
The comment, Simon, about rapid response and Liz's earlier comment about threat multipliers, I mean, they're just so apt to the future of water. But I couldn't help but also think of you, Bridget, because, I mean, as a graduate student, I'm thinking, this idea of a threat multiplier. Okay, grad studies is hard at the best of times, and studying water is hard at the best of times in an integrated way. But as a threat multiplier, now you can do it all with COVID. So did you have anything you wanted to add to this conversation at all before I get on to the next question?
Yeah, I think I did, Brian. Thank you. I think discussions around COVID-19 have really highlighted the importance of weighing trade-offs in decision-making. In the context of the pandemic, there have been discussions of public health versus the economy. But in the context of fresh water, we often have different needs for the same resources. We need water for industry, for energy, for agriculture, and municipalities. We also need to leave water in our lakes and our rivers for biodiversity to maintain the habitats. And on top of that, we also need to make sure we maintain those ecosystems so we can continue to get those ecosystem services that we rely on, like nutrient removal and flood protection. That will be especially important for our climate change adaptation planning.
Thanks so much, Bridget. I'm going to move on to the second question, but I have a bit of a issue of contention with Megan's opening remarks at this point. Because she apparently somehow managed to steal my second question in her opening remarks, and I'm not sure how she pulled that off, but kudos to her for doing so. I was planning on remarking about the challenges and opportunities associated with the future of fresh water in light of the present pandemic. So I want to thank Megan for bringing that up and making it part of her opening remarks. It made a beautiful transition, saves me speaking further about it. Get into to the second question then for the panel. This partnership seems to be just the perfect subject around resilience at the perfect time. So with resilience, we're concerned about complexity, we're concerned about uncertainty, and this idea of surprise. And really, I mean, we're living this every single day. So my question for the panel is, can you comment on why partnerships like these matter?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first there, Ryan. I think part of the answer to this lays in my response to the previous question, but I would take it further by saying that many of the threats, facing freshwater need a multifaceted adaptive approach to addressing them. And here on the St. John River, you know, there's just so many layers to this system. It's a huge watershed. It covers 55,000 square kilometers. It's multi-jurisdictional. It's the traditional home of the Wolastoqiyik. There is a lot going on here. And one of the strengths of partnerships such as this is that we can bring some of those actors and multiple interested parties together to start to tackle some of these issues, these threats facing freshwater in this system. That is obviously replicatable and expandable to other parts of New Brunswick and the country, if not even further afield. We also need to take a rapid response, and I touched on this in my previous answer, but I would add to that by partnering with a research institution like Brock University, we can bring the latest research and knowledge to the forefront to address water problems in this region. And it really is a two-way street. By implementing actions on the ground, studying the outcomes, we can contribute to the knowledge and experience for many others here and elsewhere. I'd also like to just touch on a side piece. I mean, we have been working on this project for a bit, and the partnership has also led to a number of opportunities for Brock University and the students there. So we've been able to implement some of our programming, like WWF's Living Planet at campus, which is a great way to engage young environmental leaders and help them build their skills and capacity as they move through the university realm and out into the real world. We've had Brock partner with us and participate on the WWF Carolinian workshop, which had some involvement from Brock. These are all side pieces that and opportunities that really broaden and strengthen the relationship and leverage additional benefits for the partners and all of those that we're working with.
I would add to Simon's comments, taking it up from the regional scale and looking more broadly. We really are facing a biodiversity and climate crisis. It's not a global crisis, it's a crisis hitting Canada. And we know in both international and national research, freshwater ecosystems and species are the least understood, yet disproportionately impacted. So water transcends all jurisdictions and actors. The jurisdictional divide that is too often used as the front for inaction requires us to ensure tangible evidence of success. So partnerships like between WWF and Brock University bring in important players like communities and businesses, and ensures that the models and the thought leadership are grounded in demonstrable and measurable impact on the ground. This webinar is entitled The Future of Freshwater. And so without a doubt, there will be a future with freshwater because we cultivate dynamic partnerships like these. They bring and make spaces for different voices, and we can humble ourselves to the opportunity of knowing differently because we can seek out partnerships that can change our thinking, introduce different ways of knowing, and help us to see the world and the challenges and mostly the solutions through a new lens. I really believe that's how we'll move forward.
To build off of Simon's point on student opportunities, as a graduate student, it's incredible to be able to do research that is engaging with pressing issues, but also is going to have tangible impacts to a community. And working within the partnership is giving us access to all of the great relationships and rapport that WWF has built in the many years of working along the St. John River Basin. So for instance, my first study is going to be using a questionnaire to in part understand collaboration for flood planning along the river. And without the support of the partnership and instructions from Simon, it would be really difficult to ask those same questions and have so many willing participants. And on a second note, the partnership is also going to be very helpful in the knowledge mobilization piece of my project. So once I'm done my analysis, really being able to explain it and present it to everyone. As a sustainability science student, it's sort of the dream to be able to conduct research that adds value to the people on the ground doing the work. So the people conducting the flood planning and making the climate change adaptation plans, that they'll have new insights because of the research we've done. So without the partnership, it would be really hard to conduct the same quality research in the limited 2-year time frame that a master's presents.
Great, thanks, Bridget. I'm thrilled. I'm learning things here today too, and thank you for. I'm so glad you feel that way, and I feel the same with the opportunities with this partnership. But as a moderator, I was preparing for today and learned that moderation, apparently you're supposed to be completely neutral, which I find very hard to be when we're talking about the future of fresh water, but I'm doing my best to stay neutral. So with that, I want to remind our audience that's out there today. First of all, I wanted to just thank, again, the people that are out listening and joining us. We have about, we've surpassed now the 75 people mark joining us today. And I wanted to just let you know that I'm running out of questions. So I have one more that I'm going to pose to the panel. And if you can start entering some questions into the chat box, we'll be able to get your questions to the panel here shortly. So with that, let me pose my last question. And I mean, what we've just heard from the panel, this partnership, I think, has a great deal of salience for shaping that future about fresh water that Liz talked about. And the panelists, and Simon, I think you in particular really mentioned that adaptive approach that you're taking to this partnership. But I think the audience is going to be really interested to know how you envision things unfolding in this partnership. So what do you think that adaptive approach is going to entail? And also, what kind of things are you working on now? So that's my last question for the panelists. And the other thing I read about being a moderator is watching, or sorry, is that I have also the privilege to put people on hot seats. So Simon, I'm going to volunteer you to go first on this one.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Ryan. Good question. You know, really the question is getting down to the nuts and bolts of what this partnership is going to be doing on the ground here along the Wolastoq, along the St. John River in New Brunswick. And our work, we've been working here for just about 8 years now, coming this August. And a lot of our work has always been in response to community needs. So working with municipalities on vulnerability assessments and adaptation planning, and talking bigger picture stuff around environmental flows and adaptive management frameworks and all of this sort of stuff. For me, a good example of this is the workshop that I hosted last fall with support from RSA. We convened actually a fairly small group of people from around the watershed that represented municipalities, NGOs, indigenous groups, academics, and federal and provincial agencies, really to just get a snapshot of, what is the climate situation, or what is our understanding of the climate situation in the region, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities. And it became obvious almost within the first half hour that, one, there's a lot of really good things going on. We have made a lot of progress in New Brunswick and along this river system in particular. But in the same breath, nobody has a really clear picture of who is doing what, where, when, and how. And that speaks to our inability, essentially, to learn from one another, to understand successes and challenges, and ultimately to take an adaptive approach to addressing climate-related issues, in particular flooding here along the river system. So in response to that, we have laid the groundwork already with Brock University to undertake what we're calling, at least initially, a climate knowledge network survey, and Bridget just touched on this in her previous answer. This is a social network analysis, essentially, that will help us understand which actors are doing what, where, when, and how across the watershed as it relates to flood planning and climate adaptation. That's a basic stepping stone for us to build that's a basic stepping stone to help us build out a broader program that will help the communities and many other actors build on their successes and take a whole watershed-wide approach to this issue and ultimately other issues down the road. So, we're well on our way here with this partnership. That survey is going to be going out in the coming months, and we'll certainly, as I spoke to earlier about having rapid responses, we will have results sooner, hopefully, rather than later. But that's what partnerships are like. We can move and pivot quickly. And help the communities ultimately take action to protect themselves, to protect their community, to protect their region, and to protect the wildlife and so many other habitats that are around them, and offering a vital part of our quality of life here, as well as just being part of the St. John. In the end, this will be a mutually beneficial relationship that's going to mobilize knowledge and capacity to the benefit of the actors along the St. John River, and we're going to utilize a whole series of different approaches and forums to do this. Workshops, we'll have research papers coming out of this. We'll continue to host the annual St. John River Summit, which brings together actors throughout the watershed to learn, share, discuss, and experience this beautiful river. And all the while, we are going to be taking that adaptive and responsive approach, that allows us to move quickly and ultimately be productive.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Check. I'd love to add something from the kind of the academic side of the partnership on this. I'll echo Bridget's comment about this being a dream. As sustainability scientists, we really live for these opportunities to do meaningful research together with non-academic partners. And this is one of those opportunities, and I am so excited to be a part of this, and just really thrilled that we are able to move so quickly. So I guess from an academic perspective, and as a sustainability scientist, we want to be doing work that has meaning on the ground and that's immediately applicable and matters. And we also want to be doing research that contributes to our academic community. So are we advancing knowledge in an area? And I think absolutely with this partnership, that's what we're doing. We're really interested in how you govern for climate change impacts and flooding particularly at the scale of a watershed or river basin. And there are a lot of other scholars that are thinking about these issues, but it's, you know, we haven't figured it out yet. And so having an opportunity to go into a place and understand what's happening and bring the knowledge that exists out there to the St. John, and then also, you know, be reciprocal in that what we learn, we can also bring back to our broader academic community and advance understanding, not just in the St. John, not just in Canada, but everywhere. And that's just super exciting for me. And I guess the other part of this partnership is that we are actively engaging students. So there's a real experiential education component and training component to the partnership as well. And so Bridget is, you know, the first master's student to be a part of this partnership. I anticipate she won't be the last. And we're also creating experiential education opportunities for undergraduate students through a course that I teach, and that I think has been quite successful so far. We've gone through, you know, one course where students did research and provided their findings to WWF Canada, and we anticipate continuing to do that in the future. And I think that's really cool because what we're trying to do is to engage students in understanding how research and practice connect. That, you know, what you're learning in school has real world implications and you're learning it for a reason. And so they can engage with that uncertainty. They can engage with kind of the dynamic nature of systems and that we don't know everything, but we know some stuff. And so I think that it's a real benefit to the students at Brock University as well to have this partnership, and hopefully that will continue throughout the life of it. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, so thank you so much for indulging me in answering some questions that I thought were, you know, the audience would want to hear, and or at least two of the questions that I thought the audience would want to hear, and one that obviously both Megan and I thought was really important. But you know, you have to be careful what you wish for, because I encourage our audience to have some questions, and I'm running multiple screens here if you see me looking around, and we now have a long list of questions. So I'm going to pose questions to you on behalf of the audience members. I'm going to ask one of you to tackle them. If someone else wants to contribute, make a quick point, that would be great, but I want to try to get through as much of these as we can. So let's start with one from Carrie Ann. Liz, this one's for you. And Carrie Ann says, Liz, you came to this webinar from one just before it, Generation Water, which was about technology. That's how big the water world is here in Canada. Can you connect the dots between that discussion and this one? I would like to also hear from the others on technology, the future of water. So maybe Liz, connect the dots, and we'll just try to get through a couple of our questions here.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie Ann. And it's a marathon on webinars. I don't know how this happened, but it's so exciting, and it really highlights the energy of the communities in Canada and globally. Both of these webinars, both of the webinars had international audiences on looking for applied solutions. So whether it's technology, academia, solutions are no longer created in a vacuum. And it sounds sometimes terrifying, but if we knew how to solve the world's problems, we wouldn't have the problems. And so isn't it so exciting in this day and age that we can have, again, these types of partnerships, whether it's technology, entrepreneurs, citizen science, resilience, and academic learning from a global audience to apply to regional contexts. So I think the opportunity and the connection is there is a range of solutions that will serve our challenges and get us to important locally relevant solutions, I should say, because each region might have a different recipe of solutions, but being able to say this is the wide suite is amazing and gets us some fantastic impact. So thanks for the question, Carrie Ann.
Thanks, Liz, for your response. I'm going to do my best here to try to link the connections to some kind of order. So I want to jump to a question from Sybil, and that's how can municipalities overcome the jurisdictional divide, and how will that collaboration help? So how will this partnership municipalities? And I love it because it's a very practical question, I think, where you ended off, Liz.
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in on that one. Thanks for the question. Part of it comes down to how do we do this work? How are we working with municipalities? And our experience has shown us that it is better to work with multiple municipalities at the same time and to bring the supporting actors and or other actors into the room for the discussion. So if we look at the St. John River, for example, most of the major urban development, so the municipalities in this case, are along the main stem of the river and at tributaries. In a lot of instances, they might only be 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers from one another, yet they generally, and our experience has shown, don't talk to one another about issues, let alone talking to one another about climate change impacts and the flooding that comes down their river on a increased frequency and intensity these days. So for us, it's about working with them at multiple levels, bringing them into the room and helping to build the relationships across multiple municipalities and then across multiple sectors. So bringing academic partners through this partnership and others, and other, involving NGOs like watershed groups, other provincial and federal agencies to create that broader awareness and to take that collaborative approach moving forward. Certainly takes some time. It takes boots on the ground to do that, and it also takes willing partners. And we're starting to see that along the municipality, or along sort of the watershed and elsewhere in the region, is that folks realize that they can't tackle this one by themselves, and there's power in numbers, there's knowledge and experience in numbers, and we're just looking to facilitate that, to catalyze it, and ultimately drive towards conservation impact.
Thanks so much, Simon. Julia, you had something you wanted to add in?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity. So it just reminded me of the work that we're doing in another partnership that's led by Jessica Blythe, and that's the Niagara Adapts, which is a group of 7 municipalities in Niagara that are working together on climate change adaptation plans. And I think it's this idea that you don't have to do all of the work in isolation, that you can be more efficient and even potentially more effective when you work together. And there's less redundancy. A little bit of redundancy is a good thing, but too much redundancy is not a good thing. And so I think, by understanding through this social network analysis who's doing what, where, how you're connected right now, and how we might enhance those connections to help support climate change adaptation and flood planning, I think this work will really speak to how you cross those administrative boundaries.
Thanks so much, both Simon and Julia. And that, I think, provides a really nice segue into one question that's gaining popularity amongst audience members and has been bumped up in the queue. That comes in from us, from Jen, and Jen asked, what was the specific impetus for the partnership, and what are the priority projects you're tackling first?
So I'm happy to take a first stab at this, and if I miss something or get it wrong, I'm sure somebody will correct me, possibly even the moderator. But I've been fortunate to work with Dr. Plummer and Dr. Baird for quite some time now. We've done watershed governance and watershed management work and research in this region for probably close to 15 years now. A lot of that work centered around workshops and building capacity in the region for the watershed groups on some very important water-related topics. And it's had a number of spillover effects, including participation in conferences across the country, peer-reviewed articles, published book chapters, published books, and I'm sure a few other things. But it really stems from a long-standing relationship between us here in the region and these folks as they have moved around. And I'm excited to be building upon that now with this partnership. And we've spoken about a couple of initial pieces, you know, the Climate Knowledge Network, which is essentially a social network analysis. Bridget's going to be also undertaking a research project around leverage points, and, you know, how do we use leverage points at the community level to help move more rapidly towards adaptation and the implementation of climate solutions. And I'm sure there will be some other things down the road, but you know, that's a bit of it. This is TBD. It's to be decided, and that goes back to our whole thinking around an adaptive approach that is responding to community needs in the region and bringing the capacity and people here or to Brock as needed, essentially. So that's maybe the 10,000-foot view. I'm sure there's some more detail in there, you know, that we can explore at another point. But I'll leave it to the others to add anything that I missed.
Thanks so much, Simon. And a moderator does not correct panelists, so I have nothing to say except thank you so much. I'm going to combine two questions, and I think that should put us just about wrapping up on time today. And I know everyone's extremely busy and or zoomed out, so we're gonna stick to time. But there's just so many amazing questions here. So let me combine two, and then I'll end with a question that kind of takes us back out, I think, and sets us in the national context. So the next two questions I want to combine is the one question's from Kevin, the other one's from Ashley. And Bridget, I'm thinking of you specifically here. So Kevin asks, a positive future for water resources requires insights and monitoring of the physical and biogeochemical properties of water systems. Do you have any thoughts on how this partnership would promote or carry out that necessary component? So that's the first part. The second part, and you don't have to answer, Bridget, anybody can. The second part comes from Ashley, and that is, do you have any plans to take the results of the survey and put it on a digital map, GIS type, that various individuals could access and view online? And you'll see everybody's laughing or smiling here because, of course, this has been an ongoing conversation amongst all of us about Bridget's thesis research for the better part of the last 2 or 3 months. So, but excellent questions, as they all are today, and I'll just turn that over to the panel. Who I'm sure will be thrilled to answer those questions.
Maybe Bridget, do you want to address the mapping and GIS part, and then the rest of us can tackle the water properties bit?
Yeah, that sounds good. So on the GIS part, that sounds like an awesome idea. I would love to do that. I first have to learn how to use ArcGIS. It's been a fun couple of days try and do that. But so there's already some, I will say, basic maps from the federal government that show you extent of flooding. So it'll be really cool if further down the line of the project, once we have some of the social network pieces and understand what kind of current flooding planning and climate adaptation projects are in place, to sort of overlap those. So where is there a high flood risk? Where are people really feeling the consequences of current flooding of the St. John River? And also where are the projects being implemented? And then as the social network piece, how are people collaborating to address those more at-risk areas? Or how can they increase capacity in certain areas to correspond to that risk? And if we can map that geographically, and obviously some of that will just be for, you know, the actors, and also some of that for the general public to see where is the risk and where are the projects happening would be great.
Okay, since no one else is volunteering, I will jump in on the other part. So I guess with the caveat that we are social scientists, we rely on others to do the water quality monitoring, and it's absolutely essential. We need to know where we are, and we need to know the trends in order to understand what we need to be doing from a management and governance perspective. And when we talk about resilience, a big part of resilience is this idea of understanding what's happening, what's changing, how quickly it's changing, predicting as best we can what might happen in the future, and then also planning for much worse than the worst case scenario. So, I mean, it sounds like everything altogether, but there are some kind of general principles that can guide these sorts of ways of thinking about our systems and about water in particular. So all of that to say that to the extent that we can as social scientists, yes, we are going to engage with understanding water quality on the landscape. And actually, Bridget is trying to use network analysis as a way to connect the social network, the people making decisions, with what's actually happening in the ecosystem. And so this is still in the early stages of planning, but we're on it, we're thinking about it, and we're excited to kind of share how that progresses over time.
Something brief to add?
Yeah, just briefly, I would add that WWF's tagline is nature and people thriving. So we do this work to ensure freshwater ecosystem change on the ground, and through different programs, through our monitoring programs, through our watershed reports, we do threats and health to freshwater, especially in the SJR, this region as well. Thanks. I know we're looking at the time.
And I appreciate that. We're almost at time, and I think one other really excellent question that was posed by Catherine, and that's, we won't have time to get into this, but if someone just has a brief thought before we wrap up. So Catherine writes, any thoughts about the newly announced Canada Water Agency and the potential role this partnership will play in relation to this federal commitment? So, I don't know if anyone has a 30-second response to that, but I really wanted to put that out there because I think it's a great question to bring us back out to the national landscape. This is a national level partnership, and I see Liz jumping on this question. Liz, all yours.
I know, it's so exciting because we have so much strength in water innovation, in water science, in water research, in citizen science on the ground across the country that a Canadian Water Agency will only succeed if it recognizes these types of strengths on the ground. And I think it's a huge opportunity. I think this federal government is interested in promoting and using that platform to elevate the strength in Canada and across Canada. And I think it's a huge opportunity. I'm really excited to continue to promote that when promoting the Canadian Water Agencies. Great question, thank you.
So I want to, considering we're right at time, I'm just going to end with a few remarks, but I want to also thank everyone from the audience and really start there by saying thank you to all of you for joining us today. All of the questions, which are just amazing, we're taking a record of those, and those are going to be shared with the partners, and they can reflect on those. So for example, one of the questions we didn't get to was from Ben about the impacts of changing governments and how they slow water policy development and decision making as a point of discussion. And I think that alone, I'm sure we could probably spend the next couple hours on. Maybe that's a great topic we'll take on in the future. So again, we're going to take all of your questions and feed them back to the panel. But recognizing that we're at time today, I just want to end with a couple of closing remarks. First and foremost, I want to thank both Megan and Tim for joining us on behalf of Brock University and WWF Canada, just to really launch this exciting partnership today. So thank you to the two of them. I want to thank our panelists, Bridget, Julia, Simon, Liz. Wonderful conversations and discussions, and anytime I can moderate a panel with the four of you, I'd be thrilled to. Most of all, I want to thank all of you in the audience that joined us today. Wonderful questions, and I think it's a small community of us that are so passionate about water in Canada, and if we work together, I think we can shape the future of fresh water into something really positive. Last but certainly not least, there's two people who you didn't see anywhere, but without them, this would have gone terribly wrong and would not have happened. And so I wanted to mention and acknowledge Alex Del Castello and Amanda Smits for absolutely everything that the two of them have done to make today possible and go seamlessly. Just if I could clap and say thanks, I would personally, but I can't. So thank you. We really look forward to, as Simon said, moving forward with this partnership and making action happen quickly and in a meaningful way. We'll ask that all of you stay tuned to our website at Brock, brocku.ca/ESRC. We'll have more information available about the partnership and through our social media channels, and look forward to carrying on with the next time we all meet. And until then, please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and be well.